So if I was going to, what I learned about signatures, autographs, and citations is that now you don't even have to sign them. And if you don't sign them, I don't think there's any negative consequences. They just issue it to you. At least that's what's happened to me in that one case. And they'll put a warrant out for your arrest if you don't show up. But the signature, and this is something that I learned from federal postal judge, I don't know if you've heard of him, David Wynn Miller. His name is spelled David, D-A-V-I-D, and then Wynn is W-Y-N-N. Miller is his last name. He recently passed away. But he was a federal postal judge, and he put out the information about, he put out a lot of videos and information and even a lot of written documentation about the signature versus the autograph. And if you break down the word autograph, it starts with A-U, which is authority, authoritative, authorized, and AU is also on the periodic table of elements, gold, like the gold standard. So your autograph is as good as gold. Whereas the yeah, exactly, because here's the deal. All these contracts that have been signed that we have are actually invalid because the signature actually invalidates the contract. So none of these contracts that we have, and because of the same, root language of the word signature, it's basically scribbly lines that curse the page that nobody can read. Mm-hmm. So it's just it invalidates the contract. So what you want to do if you really want to enforce a contract is you want to autograph it. But here's the problem. Here's what I'm learning now that I see as one of the problems that we have to overcome, and that's why this takes a mass effort by everyone listening, and then it's you guys who are listening. It's also your duty to tell other people about this. Download this interview and make them listen to this information and start realizing that, okay, what's the problem? What's the solution? And one of the big problems is that, the information I'm talking about all this time has been hidden from view. It's been only for the lawyers to understand the legal English and the scam that's going on in the courtrooms and with our birth certificates and the right to travel. But now that we're learning, people like me are going out there and teaching the truth. And okay, now we know the truth. Now let's start applying the truth. Even when we start applying the truth, the powers that be, the judges, the police officers, the jail system, the attorneys, nothing against you, Michael, but they will break their own laws and not adhere to the truth. And because they don't want us applying the truth. They just want their system intact the way they're using it to extort Federal Reserve notes. And even if we do start applying the truth, as individuals, they're not going to recognize that truth. They're still going to figure out a way to imprison and fine us and take away our assets and even our lives. A lot of people, when they really start coming out and they're spreading too much of a truth and they start gathering too much traction and too much of an audience, they wind up getting eliminated or being hauled off to jail and never heard from again. So what we need is a larger movement than just one person, but we need an activity. And on the last show I did with Gary Anderson, on this channel, I was talking about April 15th being a day when everyone gets together, April 15th, 2019, and instead of submitting a check or Federal Reserve notes to pay for taxes, everyone submits a promissory note and makes that offer. And because it's a negotiable instrument and it's governed by the Bills of Exchange Act and the Negotiable Instruments Act and some statutes and codes, that the IRS and the banks have to accept, by law, they have to accept our legal tender, our promissory note as legal tender. And if they don't, they're committing a felony of misconduct in public office. So that's one of the main solutions is, first I had to let people understand what offer and acceptance is, and it's a legal tactic. And now that you understand that, we can get into the promissory note and how to deliver it so that you make a legal offer that puts the bank into legal jeopardy. If they don't accept it, they're committing a felony. And if we can get this class action lawsuit together, all of us living souls, can get our value back in our autograph that goes on our promissory note that gets delivered as legal tender to the banks and the IRS.
Wow, this is fascinating stuff, Ronald. I'm so glad that you have taken an interest in this field because I know there's a whole lot of constitutional scholars that will back you up in this regard on some of these arguments that you've made. Uh, First of all, before we get any further, we're going to kind of hit down to the bottom line here in the next 15 minutes or so, but I want to make sure that people understand that we are not giving legal advice here tonight. We are asking questions and actually prompting you to do the legal research on your own. And if you think you can find a lawyer that will be able to, enlighten you in this regard, please do so. But know that most lawyers will not be able to get into the depth of the constitutional arguments that Ronald is giving at this point. So I just want to make that clear, and I want people to get curious now and start looking into this kind of a field. If you thought that someone was, well, you know how many people are emailing you and interested in this whole subject.
Yeah.
How do you direct folks to get started if they're really interested in getting to the details of these issues that you're bringing up? I mean, it's a big field to get into, and some people get lost, but I think the general public out there needs to know how to get started.
All right, perfect. Let me give out my email address then. And this is when people email me, I'm going to tell them the same thing in the email and give them the same things in the email that I'm going to talk about right now. So when my email address is farnham.ronald@gmail.com, and that's F like in Frank, ARN like in Nancy, HAM like in Mary, .Ronald@gmail.com, farnham.ronald@gmail.com. Email me, and what I'm going to send you when you email me, I will send you several different things. I'm going to send you a PDF document called The Path to Freedom. In that document is, the document is from the Sovereignty Education Defense Ministry, which is a website created by lawyers and attorneys who understand the plight that we are in, and they've given and created the documentation, the legal documentation, to remove yourself from the jurisdiction of the state. Now, that website is a wealth of, it's more information than you're going to be able to study in your lifetime, but there's a process, and the document to start with is The Path to Freedom, which I'm going to send you. It contains the process to remove yourself from the jurisdiction of the state legally via the paperwork, so you never have to pay taxes, so that you're not a U.S. citizen, you're a national, and it removes you from, but it still keeps you being a responsible individual. It's so much information, that's a whole other conversation to have. So I send you that, and I know everybody out there has a story, and I send whoever wants, I got into the entertainment business because I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to learn how to write screenplays and write books, and that's what I'm doing. I'm writing screenplays, making movies, putting them out there on DVD and on video on demand, and I'm writing books, and all this information I'm putting into all my stuff. So I wrote a book called How to Write a Screenplay in 30 Days or Less, which teaches you how to write your screenplay, how to turn it into a published book, and then how to make or sell your movie to the studios. So anyone who emails me, if you have a story or stories that you're burning to tell and you want your voice, email me. I'll send you a free PDF copy of my book, because you're listening to this show and you're a like-minded person, and I want you to be able to get out there and tell your story. And you can always email me, and I'll help you. And then the other thing I'm going to send you is the promissory note template in a PowerPoint presentation. This is the promissory note template that is fillable. You'll have your own free promissory note template. I've already done all the research and everything. And I send you that. I send you a PDF sample of one of my promissory notes that you can use as just in case you get lost trying to figure it out. And then I send you a couple of Word documents with the statutes and codes and the supporting information for the promissory note. So the purpose behind all of that is to end our slavery. And how are we ending it? We're ending it by, one, removing ourselves from the jurisdiction of these companies that are posing as governments. Number two, getting our value back by enforcing contract law and offering acceptance by submitting our promissory notes to the bank for value. That will end poverty. Everybody has value in their autograph on their own legal tender. The Federal Reserve Corporation is a corporation. They print out promissory notes that you call dollar bills. Well, we're a corporation. We've been converted into a corporation. So we can print out our promissory notes with our value on it. It's the same thing, and it's equal playing field. So I'm building this class action lawsuit, and that's how we can get started. People can get to me, get the information, and once you have that information, you will basically have the ability to be a responsible lawyer for yourself. When you walk into a courtroom and you have a lawyer representing you, according to the court, you're an imbecile and you don't have the senses to speak for yourself. That's why you had to hire somebody to represent you as an individual or citizen. So remember that. It took me years to research this. I'm giving everybody the information. It's all going to be spoon-fed to you. So as you get going on this, you become responsible living souls that are free, and we can get rid of this whole stigma that we have to listen to what the state is telling us. They're trying to take away all of our freedoms and getting worse and worse and worse, and it's becoming more violent and more penitentiary-like. Where I feel like everywhere you go now, it's basically a prison. Your own home is a prison. They can come in and just haul you out or throw you out into the street if you want to and take all of your stuff. There's no justice. There is no justice in the courts of America or the world, period.
And I like the way you term that term of art, represent yourself. That's very good. Yeah, the idea that someone needs to represent you to the court or any kind of an institution is almost like an oxymoron itself, but it just goes to point out to you that if you don't know the legal jargon and or the terms of art, they are very powerful in those kinds of situations. Like
the word understand. In legal English, it's totally different than in slang and formal English. When you go into court and the judge says, "Do you understand the charges against you?" And that's exactly what they say. He's not asking you if you speak legal English and you know that it's burglary or trespassing. He's asking if you're going to stand under and take responsibility for. Because if you're not going to, then somebody's still holding the birth certificate. And that means I think the prosecutor has to pay. If you say, "No, I'm not taking responsibility for it, I don't understand," and you know what you're talking about, well, who's going to take responsibility for it then? Somebody's got to step up. But when they ask you in court, most people are like, "Yes, I understand, I got pulled over," and they think they're just understanding the situation. But no, they're taking over the fine. And that's the first thing they do is ask you, are you such and such, and do you understand the charges? Are you the birth certificate? Are you responsible for the birth certificate? Period. Exactly.
Matter of fact, you're right, Ronald. The very first thing, this is coming from a person who used to be, municipal court, superior court, judge pro tem, myself, and the very first thing that you do when a defendant, supposedly, comes before your bench, you need to ask them to state their name and ask them to listen to the charges and ask them again if they understand why they're here and understand the charges. I think that's very fascinating that you point that out right from the beginning. You are supplying them with some jurisdiction by answering certain questions.
Exactly. In fact, the whole thing, the whole orchestration that goes on in court is all about them really securing jurisdiction over you. Like when you're sitting there behind the bar before you've even entered the field of play, when you're sitting there in the, the audience, and the judge comes in, they ask everyone to stand, "Please rise, the judge is entering." And why are they doing that? Because, again, you're showing by body language that you're accepting that judge's authority and lordship over you. And then when they call your name, and they say, "When your name is called, please rise and enter the court, go in through the door," that little swing gate that they have. Yeah. So what are you doing? When they call your name, you're standing up and saying by body language that you're that name and that's who you are, and then you're entering the field of play. Where you really, I stood up one time in a courtroom and said, when they called the name on my birth certificate, I said, "I'm here to represent that fiction." And I still wind up having to pay court costs because, that's the thing. they are highly trained in this information, and they are going to do everything that they can in the courtroom to protect their secret, to protect their business, to protect this